Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. Happy Friday, it's August 15th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. California's notoriously high housing costs have led some to come up with unique solutions to bring down prices.
We're establishing controls on how the home will be permanently affordable and how it will always reflect the community values.
We will discuss so-called land trusts and the Valley City that's trying it out. But first, these news headlines. Governor Gavin Newsom says he will ask the legislature to approve a special election to redraw congressional district maps.
We will pick up 5 seats with the consent of the people, and that's the difference between the approach we're taking and the approach they're taking.
That's a new ad released by the governor's office on Thursday. Newsom's referring to an effort by Texas Republicans to redraw their maps to favor the GOP. The move is backed by President Trump. Once approved by the state legislature, the special election will take place on November 4th. Meanwhile, Valley Republican Assemblymember David Tongipa is criticizing the move by Governor Newsom to redraw those congressional maps. Tongipa told KVPR the state faces several other pressing issues like high prices and insurance costs. He said the special election will also cost voters millions of dollars.
That's the part where if they can move at the speed of light to take on this issue and they can't do it for the other ones, and they have 100%, the majority has 100% power in this state, it tells me their priorities, and it's not the people of California.
The special election will ask voters to undo an independent redistricting committee that was established in 2010. Newsom expects the effort to give Democrats 5 more seats in the House. Cases of valley fever are on the rise. As KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, health officials are concerned that 2025 could end up with another record-high caseload.
So far, nearly 7,000 provisional cases of valley fever have been reported around the state. That's about 10% higher than the total from this same time last year. And last year was the highest year ever for valley fever cases in California. Kern County is typically hit the hardest. Valley fever is a disease caused by fungal spores that live in the soil and can be inhaled into the lungs. Most cases are mild respiratory infections that resolve themselves, but in rare cases, the disease can spread beyond the lungs and require long-term treatment. The virus is tough to prevent, but tips from health officials include avoiding dusty air outdoors and wetting down soil before digging. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
Kern County public health officials say budget information being shared by an employee union is wrong. The union SEIU Local 521 says that layoffs in the county's health department are not needed because the county has substantial money in a so-called realignment fund. But the county says that the fund is not available for public health. The county comment came the same day many workers protested the layoffs of 30 employees. The county said many of those affected have interviewed for other positions within the county. A change is coming to Valley Pediatric Care, a specialty pediatric clinic at Community Regional Medical Center in downtown Fresno is changing management. Starting next year, the clinic will be run by Valley Children's. The news was first reported by TV station ABC 30. This comes a decade after Community Regional expanded into pediatric offerings. A spokesperson for the hospital says its focus will shift back to adult care.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, part of the Prieto Automotive family, leading the industry in the IIHS 2025 Top Safety Pick Awards, helping move Mazda closer to the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities. More information and the Mazda digital showroom available at myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. It's not exactly news that housing prices are high, so high that to many Valley residents, owning a home doesn't even seem possible. But there's a growing movement in California to combat this crisis. It involves so-called land trusts. But what are those? Our guest today is Kiel Lopez-Schmidt of the South Tower Community Land Trust. His nonprofit recently renovated a house and put it up on the market. This is the first house of its kind in Fresno, and it just went on sale well below the market rate. Kiel starts our conversation by explaining what exactly a community land trust is and how it works.
There's a couple of key factors that, things you'll see consistent across community land trusts. A lot of that is within the governance. So within a nonprofit, you have a board of directors, and the community land trust model says that you should have a third of your board of directors coming from residents of the properties that the community land trust owns. The other third can come from, the surrounding community. They don't necessarily have to live in community land trust properties, but have that shared value. And then the other third is kind of more traditionally what you'll see in a board is professionals that could advance the work of the organization, attorneys, real estate agents, architects, people that understand finance or accounting. Other aspects of a community land trust is how it approaches affordable housing. In the affordable home ownership lens, what community land trust approaches it is to separate ownership of the home and the improvements from the land. So the community land trust will own land and do a long-term lease to homeowners that buy the homes. So that way we're establishing controls on how the home will be permanently affordable and how it will always reflect the community values. And then the homeowner is able to achieve home ownership with a lower purchase price. So without the value of the land in a home, it can be maybe 25 to 30% cheaper than buying a house at the market rate.
Well, we will certainly get into some specifics on that. First, I want to mention you lead the South Tower Community Land Trust. So give us an overview of what your specific land trust is hoping to do in Fresno and sort of the overall goal.
Yeah, so we got our start in organizing around establishing a park in our neighborhood in the South Tower District. And, for listeners that don't know, we describe the South Tower District as south of Olive, north of the 180 freeway. And within our neighborhood, there was a police station that was being decommissioned. And we organized the neighborhood around demanding a seat at the table with the city of Fresno that land become a neighborhood park afterward. And that took us 8 years to get to that, started 8 years ago. And that park just opened last week as Broadway Parque, is a 2/3 acre neighborhood park. So that really demonstrated how we were building neighborhood power. And within that process of organizing, saw the need to not just work on this one lot, but continue to work on affordable housing and other community assets that we wanted to see in the neighborhood.
So you're joining me here today because earlier this month, your organization put up for sale a home in Fresno's Tower District. And a little context here, it's 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, newly renovated. You're asking $215,000 for it. Now that's $100,000 less than what the home would normally go for in that neighborhood. So how did you make that possible?
Yeah, so what we saw was a home that had been sitting vacant for a good amount of time, I believe about a year, and it was available, it was on the market. An investor had bought it and done some of the, flipper special things where they redid the kitchen and did some new tile in the bathroom, did, some new vinyl flooring and carpet, but they didn't really tackle some of the bigger investments in the house. And so when we purchased it, it needed a new roof, it needed a new air conditioner. And so those were the investments that we did, the bigger, longer term investments. And, we did that through philanthropic sources. We had grant money to be able to do that. And after those investments, we've now listed it for sale, and we're going to retain ownership of the land, which is valued at about $75,000. And we've listed that property. And when a new homeowner comes in, we'll sign a land lease with them. It's a 99-year renewable land lease. So they can stay in that home as long as they want. They could leave it to their heirs if they'd like, or, when they do sell it, they commit that they'll sell it at the same affordability rate that they bought it.
Okay, so how does this type of ownership differ from that of like a mobile home park, where in many cases people might own the physical mobile home, but not the land where it's located? Yeah,
so how we would be different from a mobile home park is that we're a nonprofit organization. Mobile home parks primarily or for-profit businesses. So the rental rate that a mobile home park resident would pay is far higher. Our land lease fee that we've worked out is $75 a month, so it's a much lower rate, and is probably the most flexible amount that the homeowner could, like, we could lower that if they were in emergency and they, that $75 was make or break for them. We would want to keep them in the home rather than collecting that funding. So that's something that we would approach this with values. We want to see long-term homeowners succeed and not extract from them. So that's the major difference. And then it's different from renting in that you've got a home mortgage and you're paying down a principal balance and you're building equity in the home over the long term. And you've got a stable house payment, unlike rent where you might go up 10% or more per year.
Housing's obviously a huge issue in California, where the cost of living has risen. Is your hope that these types of projects will become more common here in the Valley? And is it even possible for this kind of structure to scale up in a way?
Yeah, I would highlight the work that the California Community Land Trust Network has been doing. I've just joined the board of that organization recently, and they've hired a staff person to coordinate San Joaquin Valley CLTs that are more emergent. We haven't been established as long. We're, getting and growing in the area. I would highlight the Wachumni tribe in Tulare County is working on their CLT. There's the Central California Land Trust that's looking at more of a regional model for CLTs with, centered in Fresno. Other creative ideas like the Central Fresno Neighborhood Trust that's acquiring apartment buildings and making those affordable rentals. So folks that are, looking at these kinds of ideas in our region, and those are growing. And we have got like an ecosystem of them.
That was my conversation with Kiel Lopez-Schmidt. He's the executive director of the South Tower Community Land Trust. And that's today's show. If you have a tip about housing in your community, get in touch. You can reach us by emailing podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.